So I want to talk about how you pay off your home by the time you're 40. And I think this is super important for a lot of us to think about this. And hopefully, if you're younger, that you might pay attention to this. But even if you are 40 right now and you set your goals to pay it off by the time that you're 60 or 70, I think it's absolutely doable to be able to do these things. And it requires a tremendous amount of dedication. And before you start going and thinking about, well, he's a professor in a business school, he doesn't know what he's talking about, I want to sort of point out two things with this, right? So you might be sort of criticizing me because of the salary that I have. There's something that's called endogenous choice. I thought about all of these decisions going forward starting when I was very young. When I was like 21, 22, I had the choice of going in. I finished my engineering degree, and by the way, that's why I did an engineering degree, was because the salary was going to be quite beneficial. And then I thought, well, if I get a master's degree in management science, it's going to help with my salary. And then I thought, if I got a PhD in business, it's going to help, right? So it's an endogenous choice. I actively thought about those things. And the other thing I want to point out is that it requires a tremendous amount of work and dedication to do these things. And I didn't really have that much of a salary. My stipend at the time, I think, was $18,000 for 4 years. Plus, we had to pay, I think it was like $11,000 of that for our tuition. So we had to live, and I lived like that for 7 years. I lived actually without getting an income after I finished all of my master's degree. So I was well into my early 30s by the time I got my a real salary that you'd sort of consider like, okay, this is a legitimate salary. So I want you to consider all of those things. If you do that rational calculation, what's called the net present value calculation, I'm not going to break even until I'm 55 to get the salary that I got. So how do you actually pay off your home by the time that you're 40? It requires, and we did this, and I think most people can do this in all parts of the world, and you might sort of, before you start arguing this, I want you to sort of think about this. It requires you to really be dedicated to paying it off and focusing on that long-term goal. So my wife and I, we actually sat down, and that was one of our goals for a long time. When we started dating, we actually talked about this because my parents, they owned their home. They didn't have a mortgage and all of that kind of stuff. And so I was used to living like that. My parents lived in a garage for some time to save up to pay for their house. And so I wanted to live like that as well, or we wanted to live like that as well. So that required us making a lot of decisions that cut our costs down like a lot. We still owned a home, but that meant like the only mistake that I made, and I still kick myself, is we had a leased car. And that was a mistake. But then we owned that car after that, I think for 13 or 14 years. And we do that with all of the cars that we own. They're really tiny. They are not bombastic or whatever, like they don't have a lot of statement to them. Nobody would even know. They're basically like a Corolla kind of car, right? Until we actually could afford these things. And it became like easier to do as we got older. So we reduce those expenses a lot. Your car is going to be your biggest thing. Your home actually is a big thing too. And if you have student loans, making sure that you reduce those student loans as quick as possible. But your home is really, really important, and where you choose to live and the style of home that you actually live in, right? We could have, one thing that when we started looking for, I was looking for a house during my professor job interview, is that the real estate agent was taking us to all these big, huge, grand homes, these massive homes. We're like, no, that's not what we want. We want something that's reasonable, that's a decent home that we're going to be happy in. And so we live in a home, I think it's 2,100 square feet, which is actually a pretty big home, but we're comfortable in it, right? Like it's completely comfortable. And before you start thinking, well, it's only because he lives in this like dinky town, right? Tallahassee is a tiny town, tiny city, and it's not expensive to live. I mean, that's partly true, but that was partly an endogenous choice too. When we're thinking about this, we're choosing where to live based on, how expensive things are. So even if you live in New York, you don't have to live in Manhattan, right? Like, you can live in one of the boroughs and then commute in. It might be a commute for an hour and a half, but it's still manageable. Or you live, quite a ways out, and it's still manageable to do those things, right? So it's an endogenous choice. You think about these things, and you think about how we're going to choose to live, and be okay with that when you make that choice, right? And then it required also to, everybody sort of made fun of, family and friends made fun of us for sort of different aspects of our life, right? Like, I had a voice over IP phone for a long time. It's kind of a Skype phone. That's what we used. We didn't have cable and all that. And this was in an era when people had those things. And it was really weird to do those things, right? So looking at ways to cut costs, even though that it seemed really strange to do those things. And every time, basically what we did is we lived off of one income. When I was in graduate school, we lived off of one income, and when I got a job, we lived off of one income, and then we kept putting that into the home. And the reason why we do this, is because it gives us financial security. So now we're at a point where we can almost retire, because that would be the biggest liability for most people, is your home, and you having to pay these things in. And so if you pay that stuff off, then you can walk away at any time, and you could just retire. And I want you to sort of think about those kind of things. It requires a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, and thinking about it for 15, 20 years. Thankfully, and I don't know what is first, graduate school sort of trains you to be committed, but I might be that weird kind of unusual person, or my wife and I are weird, unusual people that we have that sort of consistency and commitment to do these kind of things that are going to take a long time. And so it's the same thing with this reciprocity project that I'm trying to build, right? The sharing economy editing platform. Most people would have gave up, and you could see like how of a mental game it actually is, and I'm stressed out all the time, and I'm always like, it's not working, and all of these kind of things. But I'm taking this very long-term mindset that it's going to be 10, 15 years by the time this sort of starts clicking, and people get it, and people start using it in the regular, everyday manner, right? Like the sort of editing aspect of it, where people are using it on a regular basis. So I have this long-term commitment. By the way, if you haven't used it, go check it out, reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And hopefully it's going to help with your work, and I'm building all sorts of different things. I have many other ideas to do. But it's this long-term mindset where it's going to be really tough, and you sort of think about, okay, this is going to be 15, 20 years. How can I live as poorly as I possibly can, with as little as I possibly can, while expanding that revenue, and then splitting the difference and putting it into paying off the liabilities that you have, whatever those are. And if you consistently do that day in and day out, you gain a lot. And it doesn't happen overnight. It never does. It's hard. You have to live in a garage for a long time before you get to the point when you actually can pay off your house. And you have to sort of realize that all of this stuff requires a tremendous amount of dedication. You're going to lose faith in yourself. It's a journey, but you constantly are doing that. Reduce the amount of whatever you're spending, and whatever that looks like to you, and that means being weird in a lot of ways. I cut my hair. I cut my hair for like 10, 15 years, my own hair, because it got easier. 10 years, I guess, when my kids were smaller, and now that they're older. We're just starting to go back. I'm just starting to go back and getting a haircut from a barber. It seems really strange, but all of that stuff adds up, right? I don't smoke, I don't really drink, all of those kind of things, they add up over time. And it makes it easier, so we have security. So, you might be thinking, well, he didn't have a lot of fun. That's not true at all. We lived a good life in terms of, we have lots of walks, and my wife and I and family are really close together and all that kind of stuff. we have a tremendous amount of love that's in our life. And the other thing you might be thinking, well, he's going to drop dead tomorrow. Well, that's amazing. If I drop dead tomorrow, not really, but that means that my whole family is taken care of. And you know, if all of us drop dead tomorrow, that's amazing, because now that those resources that we've been able to save, we can, you know, invest it or give it to family members and, you know, extended family and all of that kind of stuff, right? Like, if you think about those kind of things, it's amazing. We can do so much with it, rather than living, you know, that where you're always feeling panicky, and it requires a tremendous amount of dedication. It requires, the hardest thing is you're going to feel like everybody's laughing at you, and, you know, what the heck are you doing? This is kind of stupid. All of that kind of stuff. That's how you feel, and you got to get okay with that. So with that, give me a thumbs up, do subscribe to the YouTube channel, take care, and hopefully you learned something. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Oh, by the way, we paid off our home by the time we turned 40, and we had about 3 months left, and then we were 41. So just in the nick of time. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.